Good morning, everybody. A small but lovely interactive crowd. My name is Antonia Marinova. I am an Associate Vice President for Programs here at the Boston Foundation. It is my pleasure to welcome all of you here in the room and those who are watching us virtually to the third in our series of convenings this fall on post-secondary pathways in Boston. We are delighted to co-host this one with United Way of Massachusetts Bay. United Way has made pathways for young adults a critical pillar of their community impact work, and their team has worked tirelessly to ensure that opportunities for education and career advancement are available to all young people, regardless of their background, regardless of their race and ethnicity. And it has been wonderful to collaborate with my former colleague Juan Cantu, who is a Vice President of Youth and Young Adults at the United Way, leading this work on bringing this conversation to you. I see quite a few old friends in the audience, but for those of you here and online who are new to our work, we put equity at the center of everything we do, and we believe that closing the gap on the region's greatest disparities opens up pathways to opportunity, to prosperity, and to equitable outcomes. In this work, we are focused on 4 big interconnected areas: economic opportunity, child well-being, community wealth, and community leadership. And while this morning's gathering is on post-secondary pathways within our economic opportunity body of work, that work doesn't happen in isolation. A high-quality, accessible, and equitable system of college and career pathways for students in Boston ensures that they have the opportunity to achieve their true potential and launch family-sustaining careers, which is clearly connected to them being able to build the wealth of their communities as well as their leadership within them. Today's program will focus on new, innovative, non-traditional pathways to success for students and young adults. This includes competency-based learning. It includes new ways to deeply integrate work-based learning. It includes apprenticeships. And it also includes doing the hard work to make sure that in making these choices, young people are informed by honest data about what different options can offer them and what success might look like coming out of these programs. We'll spend most of our time together in conversation with a set of colleagues about what it looks like and what it takes to provide versatile, flexible, high-quality career-building opportunities in different settings that expand young people's choices rather than limit them. Juan Cantu will join me on the stage shortly and introduce the panelists and lead us through a conversation with them. And remember, we always reserve at least 15 minutes at the end for your questions, so jot them down as they come to you. After that conversation, Carly Osiello, who is Chief Community Impact Officer at United Way, will close us out. For now, thank you again for joining us, and it's my pleasure to invite Juan to the stage.
Morning, everybody. Thank you. All right. Before I bring up the rest of the panelists, I'll give a little context to introduce myself and just share a little bit about why we're here. So, like Antonio said, my name is Juan Cantu. I work over United Way Mass Bay. I'm the VP of Youth and Young Adult Pathways over there, and we're here to talk about different paths to post-secondary opportunities for young people who maybe aren't connected to school, maybe aren't connected to work, and are trying to figure something out as they finish high school. Some data, I know for all the data nerds like myself out there, that might be sobering for some, might be a wake-up call, might be something that you already knew. But in 2015, nearly 3/4 of high school grads in Massachusetts matriculated to college after high school graduation. In 2022, as we were still sort of in the throes of the pandemic, maybe getting out of it a little bit, that rate fell down to 62% of high school grads matriculating to college. So, 11 percentage points dropping down. For other subgroups, other subpopulations that are underserved, like Black students, Latino students, English language learners, the drop-offs were even starker. And then if you look at Boston, the numbers went from 67% in 2015 to 52%. So, it's like wake-up call for Massachusetts, for Boston. We're a knowledge economy. We have some of the best higher institutions in the world, in the city and the state, and we still have a lot of young people who are trying to figure out their next steps. So, we're here to talk about where these young people are going after high school if they're not going to college. That's traditionally been the path. Are they going to the workforce? If so, what opportunities are out there for them? How high can they climb in their careers before they hit a ceiling? A paper ceiling is what a lot of folks call the degree wall. And maybe they're pursuing some other on-the-job training programs, some apprenticeships. So how do we prepare those young people to succeed in those pathways? So today we're going to be talking about the importance of ensuring a robust set of versatile, flexible, high-quality secondary and post-secondary career building options that work for all of our students, not just some. So I'll bring up my panelists. I think everybody can come up at the same time, but I'll introduce people as they sit next to me. So we got Ellie Pimentel, who's the Chief External Relations Officer at Duet. Eric Miller, Director of College and Career Community-Based Partnerships at the Edward M. Kennedy Academy for Health Careers. We have Adrian Level, who's a program leader at BDEA 2.0, which is Boston Day and Evening Academy. We have Marjorie Ringrose, Director of Education at the Smith Family Foundation. And then Norma Ray-Elisea, who's the ED and co-founder of Next Gen Talent. So thank you, everybody, for coming up. I'm going to jump right into the questions. So the first question is for Adrian and Ellie. So Adrian, you can go first, but so your programs at BDA and Duet, respectively, they're focused on competency-based models. So can you tell a bit about how that model works, and can you give a general description of the typical student that attends those programs, if there is a typical student?
Sure. I don't know if there is a typical student.
Right.
But hi, everyone. Adrian Level, a program leader at Boston Day and Evening Academy. I've been at BDA since 2011. I started as a math teacher there, and now I'm program leader of our 2.0 and BL program. But Boston Day and Evening Academy, we attract students from all over the city. All of our students have either attended another high school in the city or they're overage 8th graders. And so we attract students who have not been served successfully in their prior settings. The students come from, well, like I said, they come from everywhere, essentially. A big number or a rationale for why they're there is their social emotional needs for the majority of the students just weren't being met and weren't being serviced at their prior schools. And that's something that we really do prioritize and focus on while we're at BDEA. It is a competency-based school, and so what that means is we don't have A, B, C's, D's. They don't get those letter grades. The student will never get an F as a grade. The students do have to demonstrate mastery on skills before they move forward. So we have competencies and benchmarks that are aligned to the state standards, and that's how our students make success and traction at our school. They have to demonstrate competence before they're able to move forward. It allows for a lot of flexibility if you think about it. Some students may be really strong with their math skills and struggle a little bit with their ELA skills. And so what it allows for is students to make progress in their math and potentially even take a dual enrollment college class in math while they're still focusing on their high school competencies in ELA. We at BDEA, we're a Horace Mann charter school, so we're part of Boston Public Schools. But a part of our charter is to share what we do across the district, across the country, really. And so we've had a Real Institute in the past where we share like competency-based learning out. I facilitated Real for a number of years, and I remember having people from Hawaii come and people from Philly and also other people from Boston just to come and learn about competency-based and how we make competency-based happen at BDEA.
Thank you. Ellie.
Yes. So hi everyone, Eli Pimentel. I'm the Chief External Relations Officer at Duet. I've been there like 2.5 years or so. Adrian, that was a great description of competency-based. So at Duet, we're a college program, so students are learning and practicing skills as they work towards both their associates and their bachelor degrees with us. The content is completely online and asynchronous, so it allows for students to work towards college at a time that works for them. I would say that the learners that are most attracted to us are really searching for just a different design that allows them to work towards their degree, complete it, and then leverage the degree afterwards. We partner with Southern New Hampshire University for the competency-based curriculum, and what we provide, like our kind of magic sauce, is one-on-one professional coaching to the learners from start to finish. And we do that in person, we do that virtually, and it's really about providing support for students as they need it. But again, really thinking about the design that allows them to get the degree, get it quickly, and then be able to leverage it in the workforce. And in terms of students, you know, there's no kind of one typical student, but I would say, you know, our average age is like 24, 25, and most students have tried college before at least one institution. The majority of our students are students of color, the majority qualify for financial aid, and the majority of them are working and largely working full time. So again, they're navigating a lot of different things in their life, and so they're really interested in flexibility that allows them to do their life and continue, you know, earning a salary, et cetera, and also work towards their credential.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, Ellie. I mean, that's so crucial for, especially for older students who are really looking for a leg up if they're working full time, and like I mentioned, they hit that paper ceiling and they want some other way to advance their career. Duet is a great opportunity to get that, right? And you mentioned there's no typical student at Duet, but at EMK there might be a little bit more of a typical student. So Eric, next question is for you. So you are leading college and career partnerships at the Edward M. Kennedy Academy for Health Careers, which I think most people know, but recently partnered with Mass General Brigham and Bloomberg Philanthropies to really bolster their work and support more young people. So how is EMK preparing students for healthcare careers, especially, you know, those that are going down the not as well-trodden path of, you know, your doctor or your nurse?
Yep. Well, what you said about, you know, average age of the kid is 24, 25. We're trying to make sure they don't have to go to Duet at EMK, and that's nothing against Duet. We're just trying to make sure that by the time they're 25, that they've got a college career life figured out, right? Because your typical Boston kid is struggling to get to that point.
Yep.
And so being able to say, okay, health career is our focus is one piece, but I think everyone at the school would agree that college success or career success or life success really is the goal here. And so although we're doing it through healthcare, and this isn't just for doctors and nurses, right? At the end of the day, there's a ton of that's going on in the background. As I'm coming from 12 years at Whitworth, as I always say, is like, there's tons of careers in all these spaces, and healthcare is just another place where there's not only nurses and radiologists and surgical techs, but there's facilities, and there's computer science, and there's data, and there's billing, and there's administration, and all these pieces, right? But hopefully what we're doing is exposing the students to the training side, the vocational side, but also the early college side, and getting them some exposure through Bunker Hill, and most likely, I see Marvin in the crowd, most likely Franklin Cummings as well as a partner. And so, we're really trying to think through how does all those pieces fit together? Because having a CTE school with an early college program is almost like there's not enough time in the day to do those two things. So the challenge really has been, how do we kind of put those pieces together, not over stress the students, because that's one piece we're definitely very concerned about, making sure that all the opportunities are at 100%, right? There's nothing that we're doing 50% here. We're trying to say, okay, all this stuff is 100%. They're getting the work-based, site visits, early college, the whole deal, right? And so, as I keep saying, like, as a high school, we tend to think, let's get them to graduation, they're out the door, we're done.
Yeah.
We're thinking the complete opposite, right? Like, we need to be able to keep building a relationship with the kids and show them that there's a support group there, because we do need to figure out, okay, when you're 25, are you in the right place? Are you college, career, and life ready? And it's really hard to figure out whether they're there, and we're working on, like, what are those metrics? But at the end of the day, that's a really difficult place to get to. And so we've been really happy to partner with MGB on trying to figure these pieces out. Bloomberg has been a great partner in just, they're there monthly at the school, seeing how things are going and giving us some advice to what they think. And so it's been a really great partnership so far, but hopefully we're getting the kids in the right space at the end of the day.
That's awesome. That's amazing. I mean, that's pretty innovative, I think, in itself. And Marjorie, at Smith Family Foundation, you've led a lot of innovative funding in education. Early college was something that you really did put a lot of work in a decade ago, and now it's at a space where, so many more young people are taking advantage of that opportunity. And now you're complementing that work with partnerships with community colleges and apprenticeships. So could you speak a little bit on that? What is that work specifically, and what was the imperative for its launch?
Sure. So lovely to see all of you here, and it's great to see so many old friends and family. So the Smith Family Foundation is a private family foundation. We work in education, healthcare, medical research, community giving, and I have the honor and pleasure of leading our education work. And as Juan mentioned, the last decade or so has been around early college, right? And that was very much a college completion initiative, focusing on schools and communities where young people just didn't have the opportunities to experience college level work in high school and then find a seamless path into and through college. But early college is with the exception of schools like EMK that has a very specific career focus or sector focus, early college is kind of more of a general play, right? It's not degree specific. And over the years, we've thought, at the foundation, we thought, what if we could actually get a little bit more targeted in on specific degrees in occupations that pay a living wage and are growing and our employers find very, very, very hard to fill. So we spent a couple of years going around the country, visiting a lot of different countries who have found at least one approach to this, and that's apprenticeship. Now, apprenticeship is not new. It's been around for thousands of years, right? And you know it probably typically in the skilled trades. But what apprenticeship is fundamentally is it is a paid employment opportunity that combines skills training with on-the-job training. And in an apprenticeship, someone is working and learning. They are a working learner, right? They are learning and working to develop a full set of competencies required of a specific occupation. Apprenticeship in the US and historically across the world has, as I said, been in skilled trades. And what you end that apprenticeship with is typically an industry recognized certification. That industry recognized certification could, but doesn't necessarily be conferred by an accredited higher education institution. All right, so you leave with a certification in master plumbing, right, master electrician, right? So these are not necessarily confirmed by a higher ed institution. Now, apprenticeship, it works, right? We know this. And a lot of employers across the world, in a lot of other states, are looking and saying, well, why can't we bring apprenticeship into healthcare? Why can't we bring apprenticeship into education, into behavioral health, into these occupations where if you look at the way that training and competency develop happens, it is an apprenticeship. It may not be called that specifically, but it is an apprenticeship. So lots of employers in these different sectors are looking at apprenticeship. Now, what is unique about what the Smith family is doing right now is we're looking at these occupations and saying, all right, apprenticeship, working and learning, really needs to be combined with a degree in these specific occupations, because either by practice or by accreditation, a degree is required. If you want to be a surgical technologist, you have to have an associate's degree. If you want to be a licensed teacher, you have to have a bachelor's degree. Right? So these are occupations that require a degree conferred by a post-secondary institution. So in this model that we're working on, we're taking the best of apprenticeship and we're weaving in and embedding a degree. Right, so this is a model that kind of flies against the way that a lot of students experience higher education, right? A lot of students experience higher education where you attend class, and when you've earned enough credit hours, you then go on to the job market, and hopefully you land a job that relates to the degree that you earned, and hopefully it's a job that you still want. Right? Well, this is one where the degree is embedded all along in the work. So the Smith Family Foundation, along with a funder partner of ours called Accelerate the Future, we built a fund. We call it the Apprenticeship Degree Innovation Fund. And it is funding 4 community colleges in Massachusetts and their employer partners, one additional community college partner we're working with as well. And they're building out these apprenticeship degree programs. The first will launch next fall. And the first ones to go are in healthcare. They are in education. They are in behavioral health. There's a smattering of others. We're super excited about potential in clean energy and in life sciences. So Juan, you ask others, who's the typical student? For this first run out, the employers are very keen that it is incumbent workers. All right, this is a risk on employers, right? You have an employee; these are full-time employees, right? So they are looking at incumbent workers. But if you look in other states, what follows an incumbent worker rollout typically rolls back into the high school years, where you have pathways from early college, or you have pathways from other programs into these apprenticeship degrees.
Thank you. I mean, that's, I feel like you mentioned, so healthcare, education, behavioral health, and then clean energy, just some of the more non-traditional apprenticeships that you mentioned, like skilled trades, I feel like is what everybody speaks about when they talk about apprentices, but this sounds like really impressive and amazing work. Can't wait to learn more. This next question for Norma, last but not least, but so Norma, your work is around Next Gen Talent, which is an online tool that supports advisors and youth workers with career planning when they work with young people. So how does Next Gen Talent support those advisors, those youth workers, when they're working with a young person who is not going down the traditional 4-year college path?
Yes. Well, good morning, everyone. Buenos dias. My name is Norma Rea Licea, and I am the Executive Director and co-founder of Next Gen Talent. Next Gen Talent is a nonprofit that really empowers counselors and other youth advisors and their students by identifying first where are the well-paying jobs in their region. That's important for us to know, right, when we're doing career planning, and especially for low-income students who are disproportionately students of color. And second, where can I get training for those well-paying jobs, right? And we're thinking specifically for this panel about training that requires less than a 4-year degree. So think 2-year community college, apprenticeships, training academies, right, for like the fire department, for example, or police department, et cetera. So a wide range. And we do this research at NextGen so that counselors and students don't have to do it, right? We're saving them time and we're cutting to the chase, and that's really important. Part of our work is about addressing 2 things that we've seen in the field. One is the lack of transparency around which specific technical training programs actually lead to a well-paying job in our region, right? And then what it takes to get into those programs. The second is, we know that, and I see this a lot when I'm doing trainings for counselors, that most high school counselors, I would say about 90% in my experience, are not very well versed in how to talk with young people about how to navigate, identify or navigate post-secondary programs outside of four-year college. And that includes all of these apprenticeships and other things, right? And that's a huge information gap for these students and for the counselors and for their organizations. So how does NextGen tackle, right, these issues? What we do is that we partner with high schools, CBOs, college access and success organizations, the Boston PIC and other organizations, so that we can train them on how to use our tools. And that way, they're able to point students in the right direction around programs that lead to a good ROI, right? And so they use these tools, which are student-facing and advisor-facing, and they integrate them into their programs, their advising programs, as well as their curricula. So we start by training their advisors and on the use of our tools. So one of our tools, for example, is called the Where are the Well-Paying Jobs in Boston tool. It's an interactive tool on Tableau Public, which really aligns, I would say, a diverse set of career interests from students with actual job opportunities in the greater Boston region, right? So a student is able, or a counselor, to explore a wide range of well-paying jobs in the greater Boston area across industries that we know lead to a well-paying job based on our research. So let's say, for example, you have a student and her name is Delaney, and she is interested in exploring construction. And so she can go into the tool and say, I'm looking for this particular post-secondary education level. So whether it's below bachelor's, or graduate. So let's say she picks below bachelor's and I'm interested in construction. She clicks on those two things and boom, she gets a list of the well-paying jobs in the greater Boston area in construction if you want less than a bachelor's degree. Very quick, 2 minutes to get that answer, right? And that's the kind of stuff we need in our schools and our organizations to cut to the chase. Let's say after using that tool, she has decided that she wants to explore becoming an elevator constructor. You all know there are people that have to maintain our elevators, they maintain our escalators, right, et cetera. Bam, now we have another tool at NextGen called Navigator. Navigator is what we call our high-value post-secondary program directory. We have over 340 career-focused post-secondary programs in there that we at NextGen have vetted as leading to a good return on investment, which means they lead to a well-paying job. We know that, so you don't have to do that research again. And so she can go in there and look up where there are training programs for elevator constructor in the greater Boston region, right? We know that there's a union apprenticeship program for that, right? So that's the kind of stuff that our tools enable folks to do. And what's nice about our Navigator tool and makes it different from any other tool in the country, these are first of their kind tools in the country, is that for every program in there of those 340, we have all kinds of sort of inside information that we get from interviewing programs, not just website research, on the program admissions process, how to demystify that, as well as, right, like their program level outcomes. What is their job placement rate? What's their admissions rate? Those kinds of things, so that students really understand what it takes to get into the programs. And then lastly, we have these post-secondary advising guides that really provide advising guardrails for counselors on how to talk with students about all the different post-secondary options in different career areas, so business, or IT, or education, or healthcare, or construction, right? And we've heard from counselors that that's something that they really need. So at the end of the day, what NextGen does, I think, is it takes action, and it really helps to build confidence in counselors and students that they can explore post-secondary programs that we know will lead to a good return on investment, and they deserve that.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember when I was finishing college and was thinking going to law school. I feel like I was like, I'll do law, and that'll be my way into higher income brackets. It's a well-paying job. The path for me didn't lead that way down the line, as you can see. But I think you
did all right.
Yeah, I did okay. With tools like that, and with like support systems that you all have shared, I feel like I could have potentially gone down your path, but I wouldn't be here then. So maybe I shouldn't have done it. But the connecting tissue around all this is really around supporting youth and young adults to succeed no matter what path they decide to go down on. It could be an apprenticeship, it could be going straight into the workforce and then going to duet, or maybe and knowing right away they're like, I'm going to be a radiologist, so I'm going to EMK, right? So these next couple questions are for everybody on the panel. They're going to be a little bit more policy focus. So I know for my policy wonks from United Way that are here, thank you. Might be a little fun for you, but so Mass Educate, which I think a lot of people know about, the statewide free community college program, just transformative piece of higher ed policy. We've seen a spike in enrollment in community colleges since it was implemented. So how do you all think, is there a way that we can use Mass Educate to encourage growth and encourage youth to enter into these non-traditional pathways at a community college? And anyone can start. I know there might be some folks who are a little bit more Adrienne,
I
yes.
can jump in,
Yes.
sure. So I say definitely. I mentioned earlier that we practice, like we want to make sure our students have access to college, and so dual enrollment is something that we really push our students to do. We've got a great partnership with RCC and their Smart Building division, where we have a number of students who are in our Rising Stars construction pathway who go to RCC and they take classes on weatherization and that end up giving them industry certifications that they can use, they can add to their resume while they're simultaneously pursuing this construction pathway. And the construction pathway, what it does is it gives them access to industry professionals, they get access to workshops, and a big part of it is pre-apprenticeship training from the Glaziers Union with these young people, so that when they graduate from BDEA, they graduate with their pre-apprenticeship hours so they can go right into the union and they have the industry cert. So I'd say just that early access to dual enrollment opportunities that provide the certs for the young people.
I think one of the biggest challenges, though, is that we're kind of in the minority of where the students go, right?
Yeah.
Because to your point in the beginning, they're all thinking 4-year, 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 no matter their GPA.
Right.
They're always thinking 4-year, and that's great as a goal down the road, but they want to go directly into 4-year, and for so many students, that's not only not possible at that moment, but it's probably not the best path either. Right, going into a place that might not have the support system to help them along, right? And I'm not saying every community college does that either, but there is a way to go and say, okay, well, let me slide in here and take a few classes in this space first to make sure I really am invested in moving forward in healthcare, right? And Mass Educate is a great opportunity to do that. Right, to go in there and test the waters a little bit first before you're committing $50,000 a year at another institution in Boston to potentially fail out in some cases, right? In a lot of cases, unfortunately. And so I think one of the things that we've been talking about with EMK from kind of guidance counselor perspective and administration perspective is, 4 years great. There's a lot of kids that's a good option for. We probably need to do a better job of exposing to all the other options, right? It's been very common, and working at Wentworth for 12 years before this, it was really common to try to push kids from Boston Public Schools into 4-year institutions. And that's because the kids who were going had success. That doesn't mean that everybody was having success in that space. So how can you kind of show various pathways? So even though we're building this relationship with Bunker Hill and down the road Franklin Cummings, and these are 2-year institutions, we're also looking at it as saying, okay, what are the places that you can go after this if that's what you choose to do? So let's try to get them more thinking through community college first, not have to worry about those funding challenges that usually come up in August when they sign in for a 4-year institution and they realize they can't pay the bill. Let's go the 2-year route first. Let's do the core classes. Let's connect all the pieces for them. And then when they're through this, they can say, oh yeah, I remember Mr. Miller said Regis is a good option for me, Fisher is a good option for me, and this is a good option if I want to go into the health sciences. Right. So I think it's getting better at BPS, right? Of being able to say like there's other options, but there's still, we've kind of really like beat them over the head about 4-year, 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 4-year. And I think now we're struggling. How do we reverse that a little bit without saying like, you're not enough to go into the 2-year. That's not the case at all. It's that there's all kinds of other pieces within the system that are not on your side yet.
Yeah.
So let's try to figure out how to get you academic to the right place. Let's get you figure out financially to the right place first, and then we can kind of, help guide you in the right direction.
Yeah. There's rungs on the ladder, and that's one of the rungs to get to
Yeah,
your end goal.
we tend to miss the first
Yeah,
few.
for sure.
I might add, that in this work that we're beginning on apprenticeship degrees, it was very intentionally started in community colleges for two main reasons. The first is that these are the places that deliver the degrees for these really good jobs. The second reason is that we have Mass Educate now, which, really materially reduces the cost of training, whether it's the cost of training on the student, right, or it's the cost of training on the employer. Right, so it's a huge opportunity to take advantage of this important policy leap in Massachusetts, which, has followed on the heels of this policy leap in many other states ahead of us, but we're here. I do think that in the context of free community college, it is going to ask us to take a hard look at transfer. Because some of these programs, in order to progress, some of these 2-year programs, in order to move on in your career, you do need to move into a 4-year degree. So how can we ensure that, to begin with, amongst our public institutions, that whatever credits you earn in your associate's degree path transfer fully, right, to your major or your preferred degree course, as opposed to a lot of electives if you were to transfer into a 4-year institution. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done on that. Fortunately, people are beginning to work on that, but I think we have some way to go. I would also put a plug in for Mass Educate being available for dual enrollment. Right now it's not, right? It's for students who've graduated from high school. But if you think of how you might blur these very artificial lines between the time you're 18 in high school and 18 when you're in college, might we consider moving eligibility for Mass Educate back into the high school years, at least at a start, into programs that are really well designed and thoughtfully put forward for students. One other thing I would add that Mass Educate is going to, I hope, ask us to think really hard is about the number of seats in these programs that lead to really well-paying jobs. If you wanted to be a surgical technologist, there are jobs waiting for you with the Commonwealth's largest employers, with great pay, great benefits, great job career ladders. But you might not be able to earn a seat, right, at your local community college in their programs because the program capacity is limited. And it is that way in a lot of these programs, especially in healthcare. And I think that's something that we as a state, and there are a lot of players who would have to come to the table around this, but we as a state need to think hard about how do we increase the capacity. If we make cost less of a barrier and we increase the demand for these seats, how are we going to meet that demand?
Yeah, these programs are more selective than Ivy League schools in some cases, right?
Sure.
7 spots in radiology for 150, 200 kids who are applying. That's like, how are we going to increase the workforce if those spots are so limited?
I have to say, so in my experience out in the community, I'm actually seeing that a lot of young people are more open to programs outside of 4-year, and that's continuing, that pace is continuing. I think it's more the schools, some of the adults in their lives, their families that are pushing 4-year, 4-year, 4-year. A lot of the college access and success organizations I work with are now saying that about half of their students are thinking about not 4-year college, and they're figuring out that they need to learn how to advise them around those options because they never have, right? I think for Mass Educate to really be transformative, it needs to convince young people that the workforce pathways that community colleges offer will actually lead to a good job, right? Like I know for my generation, Generation X, shout out, gang, gang. We with loans, we were like, time to go to college was like, cool, like I'll take this loan, I'll take this loan, I'll take this loan. We take all the loans, right? And I'll figure it out. I'll just figure it out. We were told we could figure it out. If you have a bachelor's, you're gonna be set. You'll be set.
Yeah.
Now you talk to a young person, especially a low-income young person who's hearing things and watching things and observing, and we have to give them a lot more credit than we do young people because they notice the trends. They know what's going on, right? That you say loans to them, and I talked to this one girl at a training the other day, and she was like, Miss Rayleigh, say a loan is like the new F word. Like they're just like, they've seen brothers, sisters, neighbors, friends go into horrible debt that they cannot climb out of. They can never move out of their parents' house. They can't build wealth. They can't buy a home. And so they're like, wait a second, is this worth it? And yes, there are still, of course, 4-year college degrees that are worth it, but which ones, right? Which ones? And which ones that are not 4-year are worth it? That's what we need to focus on. I think that right now it's really difficult to get colleges to be transparent about their outcomes when it comes to things like job placement or admissions, and so that's part of what we try to get from them, but not everyone gives us that data. So it'd actually be really interesting to see if we could place some requirements on the participation in Mass Educate on colleges, where they would have to give data on their outcomes and make that public to high school students and counselors, right? So that we can see, like, yeah, what's going on? Are are your graduates getting good earnings? Are they getting good jobs, right? Let's see that. I also think, the state could facilitate this. There's a great tool that the state has out called PSEO, and I don't know if you're familiar with it, but you can look up graduate earnings by college major for any of the public colleges 2 and 4 year in the state here through that tool. But it would be great if actually we could get more up-to-date data on earnings by matching UI wage records to program completers here in the state, like they do in states like Texas and North Carolina, so that, again, those earnings are more up-to-date and we get a more real picture of what's happening.
Thank you.
I'll weigh in a little bit. So I think that what's really positive about this particular time in terms of policy in this area and when we're thinking about Mass Educate is this attention on the different layers of barriers to accessing programs, to even knowing that programs exist, to persisting, to completing. And I think, and certainly a lot of what we think of at Duet is how do we think of as many barriers as possible that we can tackle at a time. And I think cost is certainly one, but then also thinking about the modality. Is it in person? Is it online? What time is it at? I think it's wonderful if a person, young person or a little older, can dedicate themselves fully to the learning experience, but likely they're also going to need to work. And so are we creating education opportunities that allow people to work? And also, I guess related to that, seeing their work experience as a positive. Like maybe the young person didn't have access to an apprenticeship, but they got that kind of early career experience through their job. Then what's the on-ramp for them later as they're a little bit older, right? And making sure that we're creating those on-ramps at multiple points in time so that we're not kind of closing those opportunities early on.
Yeah, that's amazing. I know Duet also has like job training, coaching programs.
Yes, career coaching, because we do believe in the power of the bachelor's when you can get it in little time for little to no cost. And we also believe that most people like really can use support in thinking about ways to leverage that degree for themselves, perhaps in an industry that they've never considered before, just in a whole other space, because the bachelor's does open so many doors.
That's amazing. And going back a little bit to some of this mass transfer work. So, when I was working at High Square Task Force, I mentored, supported a lot of young people as they were trying to get into college and complete. Also mentored a bunch of young men of color as well. And I remember one young man who, had his eyes set on, like, I want to become an executive director of a nonprofit. Like, that's his end goal. And he's like, but I can't go to 4-year right now, so I'm going to go to Bunker Hill. So, like, went to Bunker Hill, didn't pay for school because he was, Pell Grant eligible, so he was able to get his 2-year degree for free. Used mass transfer to go UMass Amherst, got his degree at the business school over there, and now is working and thinking about getting his master's in public policy, and it's like getting down those steps. But as you all were talking about loans, he was like, I'm not going to take loans out. My parents are immigrants. They're working full time. I can't afford to do this. So he took it slowly but surely, and now he's like getting on that path. So it's just again, not everybody's going to be going straight into the 4-year, even if they are capable, even if they have the grades and the abilities. They're just financially maybe not able to do that. All right, another policy question. This is a very broad one, but again, if folks have insight into this, and I think some of you answered it a little bit, but what is the role of policy, at the state, at the city level, in increasing and improving some of these models that we're thinking about? Competency-based models, dual enrollment, early college access. Has anything, I know Mass Educate has helped a ton, but even that has some limits, capacity concerns at community colleges. But has anything helped? Is there something down the line that you think could be very useful and successful in this? That's a big one, so.
Yeah, I can
Yeah,
jump in.
go for it.
I'm going to jump the question a
Yeah,
little
yeah.
bit, Juan. I think at the core of the question is us keeping an open mind about opportunities and pathways that are really different than what we may have experienced ourselves. For the non-traditional to become the new traditional and the norm, and the kinds of opportunities that most young people, like I said, are aware of and have a way of sort of wrapping their heads around what that's going to be like. I think that where programs are not working for learners, I think we need a better understanding as to why. So, we look a lot at sort of enrollment in one particular time. I think we can have more focus on completion rates, but I think we need more of that qualitative data too around what learners are looking for and what parts of the experience maybe isn't working for them or wasn't working for them in that particular time, to help us, again, from a design perspective, create more programs that are in line with what folks are looking for.
Yeah, look, like we're way behind in early college side, dual enrollment, right? As a state. When you look at Texas, California, New York, Florida, like to blow us out of the water. And Marjorie and I were talking about this a little bit before, which is we've kind of gotten really comfortable with being, for many, many, many years, #1 in education in Massachusetts. And so we see that kind of success, and we're like, okay, well, maybe we don't need to spend money in these spaces because we're fine, right? And I think what we're starting to see now is that actually we weren't fine. We do need to spend more money in the vocational side and try to get more kids interested in that, because that's probably the proper pathway, right? We need to spend more money with Mass Educate and community college, because that's would open up a door for a lot of students, even the additional funding that's on top of that for other financial hardships. From the kind of early college perspective, we need to relax a little bit what's going on in that space in order to provide more opportunities for more institutions of higher ed to get involved, because there's only a handful. We have lots of 30-something, 40-something schools within the 95 belt, and most of them are not doing dual enrollment, right? And so if we look at the space, like how do we incentivize some of those other institutions to be engaged and involved in that work and getting the kids from their local neighborhoods, towns, municipalities, whatever, to come to the school and get some free coursework, and not put the burden also on, in a lot of places, the school districts to pay for the students to go and take advantage of these opportunities, right? Like there's enough that has to go on in a high school, let alone having to figure out how much of your budget is going to go towards dual enrollment courses for your students. So how do we expand some of those opportunities for everyone? But I think in a lot of ways, focusing on the gateway cities that are struggling the most in this as well.
I can jump in. So at BDA, we are an alternative high school. Our students are 16 to 22, and they're not all looking for the 4-year, on track to the 4-year college. Part of our program comprises of our students participating in internships during the school day, so they can get access to that hands-on workplace experience. Because even we hear from employers, when young people graduate from college with 4-year degrees, they're lacking that experience. And so we want to make sure our students have access to that experience. It's been helpful for us that DESE actually acknowledges, the workplace learning and provides credit for young people for that. So we give our young people credit. They have to demonstrate competence on an internship with a real experience, and that has been really helpful for us. Another thing that's been supportive for us as an all-ed charter in Boston is that a couple of years ago, the charter school, the Office of Charter Schools and Redesign worked with DESE to come up with some accountability measures that were really more equitable for us as a school. And so we were able to kind of look at our data and categorize our students based off of levels of engagement and make goals for the students based on the various tracks that they were in, as opposed to looking at the school holistically and looking at graduation rates and attendance rates and MCAS scores. We were able to come up with our own accountability measures, which has been extremely helpful. I'll give you an example of as why that matters. In Massachusetts, we look at, a 5-year senior. We count the graduation rates for young people that have graduated 5 years. At BDEA, we have students that have graduated in their 6th year or 7th year. And so our graduation data a couple of years ago says, I think maybe 20 students graduated from BDEA, when actually it was 50 students. And so being able to use real data that reflects what we're doing is extremely helpful.
Yeah, I might add to Eric's comments kind of on the funding side. So, when you're talking about these programs that you all are running and you all have built, and I've actually built 0. I just have the great pleasure of working with everyone who builds these programs. These are really hard, complex programs. Right? These are not simple, point in time programs for young people and young adults. These are complicated. They're going across siloed systems, right? And trying to break down these silos, both funding and programmatic and institutional, where over time things have just been built where too many students don't make it over from one side to the other. They're complex to build. They do actually take time to prove out. If you're working in the college completion space, you're talking 6 years, 4 years at a minimum, right, to prove out that something is working. And where, I would hope that policy moves, and I know this is exceptionally difficult in the way that a state budget works, but these programs not only need access to right-sized funding, but it needs to be reliable, and it needs to be predictable and sustainable. Right, so it's not just that it's funding, it's a particular type of funding that I think these programs need in order to get the runway and in order to really go at the complexities of the systems that we've created.
If it's okay, Juan, I'd love to speak to sort of what's missing in policy.
Yeah.
I think one is that we should be providing financial incentives to community colleges and community-based programs that are going to make paid co-op or co-ops or apprenticeships part of their program, a critical part of their programs, right? The Smith Family Foundation is doing a lot of work in this and promoting this model, and we love that. Franklin Cummings Tech, shout out to Marvin who's here, and Aisha who's not, and Michael, my friends out there. They're a leading example of how to make co-ops and apprenticeships, or a co-op a centerpiece of their workforce training programs. So in the next several years, all of their programs will have a co-op component. And that's something that I think we need to aspire to more in our city. Love them for that. I also think that we need to create some sort of like good housekeeping seal for community colleges and community-based programs that can prove that they lead to well-paying jobs, that their graduates get those jobs, and that they provide evidence, right, of that through strong labor market outcomes. Here, Eric already spoke to expanding early college, but I think finally, and this might be a little controversial, right now, students are really bearing the financial risk, right, when they attend a program to see if it will pay off. I think we could implement some sort of policy where if a student graduates from a program and does not land a well-paying job, that institution can reimburse part of their tuition to be held accountable for that. Yeah. Sorry.
That'd be pretty amazing. That'd be awesome.
How about that? Just kidding.
Yeah, that'd be amazing. I know we're nearing time, and we want to make sure that you all have the audience's time to ask questions. So I'll just talk a little bit and then ask one more question for the panel. I was recently at a Jobs for the Future Pathways to Prosperity conference in Cambridge a couple months ago. It was pretty recent. But they closed their conference by mentioning that 3 things that young people need to thrive as they approach adulthood and the workforce are choice-filled lives, positive peer and adult relationships, and explicitly developed navigation and decision-making skills. Mm-hmm. So for everybody, again, like what can we do in Boston, Greater Boston, Mass, to ensure that programs that you all are running or that are working on, or pathways that you're creating or hoping to do, can support these young people as they enter adulthood? It's a time of change. It's a time of figuring yourself out, of making mistakes, making huge decisions that are going to impact your life. How can we make sure that, when those young people do make those decisions, we're there to support them and help them out?
The first thing that comes to mind is making sure that we have partners that know who our young people are. Our relationships are crucial, right? And they're going to make mistakes. We make mistakes, right? And so making sure that we have partners who know who they are, who can set up structures that allow them to be successful. A BDA student should have the same access and opportunity to an EMK student, mm-hmm. right? The supports and structures might look a little different, but let's not give the EMK student the different opportunity than the BDA student. So just making sure you understand who the young people are and providing those supports for them. Funding is crucial. None of this would happen if we're not able to fund the opportunities for the young people. And then along the lines of the relationship, just the consistent communication. The communication with our young people shouldn't stop when they graduate, right? Like we need to communicate with them and make sure that we have some viable post-grad supports in line for them, so they know that they can reach out to us once they leave us, so they know, like, if they get stuck, they can come back, and that those employers and those partners also have communication and contact with us as a support. So I think the relationship piece and that handoff is essential.
That continuity of student support, right? I mean, you're hinting on it, right? But that transition is hard enough for an 18-year-old to move from high school into higher ed or training or jobs or any of that, right? So who's the person who's going to support them through that transition? Having someone from and as being from Wentworth, where I set up a whole system of people who help support the kids as they're coming onto the campus, you almost don't want that support right away, right? Like, because that's just another transition to another adult who might be caring, but at the same time, like, it's just a whole new relationship to build when they're trying to build all these other things, right? And so how do we, 18 and graduation is not the end of the relationship between the high school and the student. It has to continue. has continued for many years. We need people who can help them through the career side. We need people who can help them go into the higher ed side and help with transitions as they move forward. That's, you know, we're here in the Boston Foundation space. Success Boston had a lot of great pieces to it, but that was a similar thing, right? You kind of all of a sudden you stop and then you transition to a new person. And so how do we help with that continuity? I mean, I think that's just so important on the social emotional side of the student to really try to figure out how to bridge that gap.
Yeah, adding on Eric and Adrian's points, I think the relationship building piece also needs to exist among all of our programs and others, right? Young people are largely learning about their opportunities through others. You know, I know at Duet we build a lot of relationships so that folks know about our programs so they can refer young people and older people to study with us. But I think the better understanding we each have of what our programs are like, how long they take, the pros and cons, who you need to talk to if you are, you know, working with someone who wants to explore that program, the better that sort of continuity will be, right? It's really taking a more kind of collaborative approach to creating awareness and creating access to the different opportunities we all offer.
I might add on to the support emphasis is that support costs money, right? And we need to recognize that, right? In our state funding formulas for higher education, for K-12, and you know, we've talked a lot about free community college. The proof in the pudding is going to be whether students actually graduate. Many have enrolled. Persistence and actual completion is the aim here, and that's going to take more than money. And I would applaud, right, any funder, any public official or legislature who appropriately funds the support side of all of these endeavors as well.
I think for me, a few things. One is when we talk about social capital, one thing that drives me nuts, right, is as an Indigenous Latina woman from JP, is oftentimes when I hear people talk about social capital, they'll say things like, you know, low-income people or people of color like don't have access to social capital, and I'm like, we live off of social capital. That's how we survive, homie. Like, what are you talking about? That's crazy. The issue is we don't have access to certain kinds of social capital that have access to certain kinds of power in society, right? And so part of this is not just enabling young people with access to people who have that power, but also teaching them how to talk with those folks, getting them in experiences where they can connect with the work and learn more about it, like on the ground, and understand it. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've had students like completely change their career that they talked about for a year that they wanted to do after one informational interview, or literally asking me like, oh, I want to be an ED too, Norma, like, what's that about? And I talk with them about it, and I talk about how like you're on all the time, and they're like, but I thought you have a staff, don't they? Like, don't you just tell them what to do? And I'm like, I still have to do things. Like, still have to show up, and like, you know, they don't do everything for me. And they're like, oh no, I don't want to do that, forget it. You know, and it's like, okay. And so like having them understand, right? Like informational interviews are great because you can ask things like, what do you wish you had known before you pursued this career or this path? Like, that's stuff that young people need to hear and understand, like the good and the bad and everything in between, right? And so there's a lot there. I think the other last thing is a lot of my students, former students, get very scared about making decisions about careers because they feel like if I pick something, then I'm stuck for the rest of my life. And I'm too young to know, so I'm just gonna flounder about. And it's like, what I always say to them is, you know, indecision dies in action. Like, do an informational interview, go job shadow somebody, because the more info you get, the more you're gonna start to feel in your heart like, I don't know if I like that, whatever. And really talk to them about how to market and understand what their transferable skills are. Most of us have changed our career paths in a number of ways, right? Like from what we studied, like you said, right? So have I. I majored in government, and now that you all know me, you know why I cannot be a politician. So, right? And so I talk to students about this. Like, this is why I work in education. Do you hear my mouth? Okay, cool. And so So, right, and so it's important for them to understand that things change and that's okay, but you need to know how to explain to an employer, I may have worked in this, but these are all the skills I have from that. And that transfers to this industry because, right, and so talking to them in that way I think is important.
Thank you. Well, thank you everybody. We have some time for some questions from the audience if there are people there. I know there's some runners in the back with mics in case people want to. We have a couple questions here. I think we can go. Yeah. Yeah. And then, yeah.
Thank you. I hear everything. I like the idea about refunding money when you can't find a good job. But now let's think about this. We're not really talking about what's wrong with students, but how to improve students. But let's acknowledge anti-blackness. We need to acknowledge, not just acknowledge, and bring awareness to students. It's not them. It's the whole society and the globe. And Boston, you're number one. Be number one in finding solutions to anti-blackness.
Yes, ma'am.
The country, the world needs this. We've got a lot of issues in this world, and we need everybody pulling together. We have to address anti-blackness, and it's in every one of us. How could it be anything else? We all have the same education. We see the same things. It's in me, so I know it's in you. So let's put some money into finding solutions. First acknowledge, become aware, and then seek solutions. Be number one in that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and like Eric was mentioning, I know Massachusetts often says we're number one in education but then if you look at the certain populations, certain groups of students, we're lagging behind
That's
a
right.
lot of states. So absolutely. We have another question over here, and then I think over there.
Good morning. My name is Latanili. I'm the Executive Director of Apprentice Learning, and we work in the middle grade sphere. We are primarily concerned with young people being able to be the conspirers, the leaders in their own career, their own life trajectory. And so I love a lot of what everyone is saying, and I'm interested, right, because we're talking essentially about a public-private partnership, educators getting young people ready for the workforce. My question is, on the other end of that, right, because we can do, to what this sister over here said, we can do a lot of work, and we are, to prepare young people, right? And what are we doing on the other side? If you all have knowledge of this, I would love to understand it, to prepare the workforce for these Black and brown young people, Black, Latinx, indigenous young, like diasporic young people for this workforce, right? So that's my first part. And my second part is, what is a well-paying job? Like, what does that salary look like? So.
Well, one thing I can just kind of add to this is I feel privileged to be working with Mass General Brigham in this work, right? Because typically industry isn't at the table in that level, right? And trying to figure out all the little details of how these things work, wanting to understand and give forth more and more resources, right? I think there's some great views so far. There's some great work being done in that space, right? So I 100% agree with you, right? Like, you have to have all those pieces at the table. I think one of the things that I've for many years has said is, like, industry comes down to higher ed and says, you're not preparing the students. Higher ed comes down to K through 12. You're not preparing the students. And then it's left kind of to K to 12 to kind of figure that out. Having the higher ed partner in industry and K through 12 all in the same place is such an important piece. And so hopefully what we're starting to see is more of that happening. Because except maybe in spaces on, we talk about skilled trades, right? Like, that might be one of the only places it happens more than others. And so hopefully we can start taking some of what we can learn from that space and start applying it throughout. For what's interesting is from the EMK perspective, I'm just going to talk a little bit like the well-paid jobs, right? What we've kind of thought through is, there's that kind of career side of saying, if if you don't want to go to college and you want to go into a career, that's great. All EMK students by 11th grade, we're trying to get them their CNA, right? So they can go out and work. Now, granted, being a CNA is not exactly a high-paying job. It's going to get you above minimum wage, but it's not a high-paying job. But hopefully what we're able to do is get those kids interested in additional training and education on top of that, right? That's your starting point. You know, when we talk about like all the fun, you know, even if you're going to community college, school may be paid for, but everything ain't, right? So hopefully that job can get you the opportunity to get higher than you would in any other position when you're working part-time to try to pay some of the bills and get some money. And while you're trying to get yourself upskilled in whether it's training or community college or wherever that path may be, right? So I think we've prided on, let's first get them in the door when they graduate high school, and then let's try to help them navigate through the various barriers that have really been put in front of them for so many years, that society has put in front of them for so many years.
Our approach is a little different. We are really selective with the employers that we partner with. We want to make sure that our young people learn and get access and exposure, but in a safe environment, a safe place. And so we thoroughly vet and have conversations with our employers to make sure they understand who our students are, where they're coming from, and what they're coming with. And we have like that communication loop throughout their internship experience. And then when we think about I'm looking at Mr. Quay, our Pathways coordinator. When we think about a well-paying job, can they live in Boston, right? Like, can a young person afford to live in Boston? If they can, then that would be a well-paying job.
I just want to. You guys hear me? Is it for the live stream?
Yeah, for the live stream, people.
Microphone check.
There we go.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate lack of access. As a Black woman who has been in the work field for a very long time, it took many years for me to get to a pay grade that made sense for my life, and I think I was very well prepared. And I feel as though one of the things I started to do when I was looking for employment with specific employers is I went straight to their org chart to see if I saw anyone that looked like me in some of those positions that I felt that I was qualified for. And oftentimes there were none. So I like your comment about doing the research on the companies, because I think a lot of times people are prepared and ready and enthusiastic, but what they have to deal with on the other side of who is allowing access is what is a huge deterrent for anybody, much less a young person. I was a full adult and watching people who was a lot less, in my opinion, qualified, but met a different criteria than I did, be able to exceed beyond me. So that, for an adult, I feel I'm a seasoned woman, is extremely discouraging. And those are the type of conversations I have with my daughters about the reality of what is really the elephant in the room that we are very scared to talk about, or we'll mention it, but we won't dive deep in it. So I just feel as though I would love to have seen some of the decision makers or be in part of conversations with more of the decision makers who make those decisions to bring on people into their organizations and put them in key positions, to hear exactly what their process is like and what they're looking for or what they're not looking for or what their organization doesn't look like.
Maybe that's the next panel. The decision makers.
One
I
more.
think we.
Sorry.
Sure, yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to answer. For Next Gen, we have a very clear standard of what we mean by well-paying job, and that is that the job should pay at least 80% of the regional median wage. So the regional median wage in Boston is around $50,000 at median, so that's what we're looking at, right? And this is for a job that's right out of post-secondary. So we make very clear what that is, and our tools have that cut off. I will say at Next Gen too that we see anti-blackness, anti-brownness, homophobia, all the things. all the ugly things pop up in counseling of students. I'll tell you, I was at a conference about a year ago, and I was doing a training with probably 50 counselors from College Access and Success organization, and I asked the crowd, why do you think that Black and Latinx and Native American students don't major in this particular college major as much, or they don't go into these fields as much? And the answer from one of the College Access and Success counselors in front of everyone was, well, maybe they're not willing to do the work. Right? And so there it is. And so I was mortified the whole walk back to the car, because I was like, I started to see red, and I was like, how do I communicate with this person after this conference and not go to jail? You know what I mean? And so, and this is someone who's counseling our students. I was mortified. And so one of the things that we do at NextGen is that we have a professional development wing of our work where I personally train counselors. We have a session called Confronting Bias in Career Advising for Youth, and we talk about anti-Blackness. We talk about all the things. Anti-women, all the things, right? Because a lot of this rears its ugly head just on one-on-ones with students. And students have their own biases, right? And have their own ideas about their limitations because of who they are, which is really sad too. So we do pay a lot of attention to that. And we're a women of color run organization, so it's very important to us.
No wonder the young person you spoke to about becoming an ED was like, oh, that's too much work to do. You do everything. But then you do. Well, I know we're at time, but thank you so much to the panelists. Please give a round of applause to our amazing panelists.
Hello, everyone. Well, I want to start off by doing another round of applause and thanking our panelists, Eli, Eric, Adrienne, Marjorie, and Norma. Thank you all so much. And a big thank you to Juan and Antonia. You guys are a dream team, and this was really wonderful. Thank you for pulling this together. I'm Carly Alciello. I'm the Chief Impact Officer at United Way. And just want to say a few closing words. So at United Way of Mass Bay, our strategy centers around economic justice, and we are unapologetically focused in on race and ethnicity and thinking about how we are truly focusing in on our Black and Latino young people and adults and children to really move them forward and to create a society and a commonwealth that is working for them. We are doing that work with TBF, with Smith Family Foundation. We are always looking for other funding partners that want to be in this work with us, and we're doing it with our nonprofit partners like the ones that you heard from today. As you heard from our panelists, young adults aren't heading to college at the same rate that they were a decade ago, and other pathways are needed to ensure that they are finding their space in the world. And they have access to economic stability and success in a place that's becoming increasingly harder to live in. Like the Boston Foundation, United Way focuses in on the intersections of post-secondary success and early ed and out of school time, housing, economic inclusion, and wealth building. We heard from our panelists today about the importance of competency-based models like Duet and BDA 2.0, where youth and young adults can show their expertise in subjects and topics that suit their learning models. We learned about innovative work the Smith Family Foundation is supporting with community colleges across the state, working in tandem with employers to support apprenticeships. We know from NextGen Talent and EMK about the importance of informed advisors and support systems to ensure youth and young adults have the information needed to take the next steps after high school. So what's next for all of us? What's our call to action? I have a couple things for folks to think about. If you are a funder in the room, I think Marjorie said it best. Programs need flexible, long runways. At United Way, we have made commitments to our New Way Forward partners. We've given them 7 years of unrestricted funding, right? That's letting them not only do their work, but have the freedom to engage in the other things they want to be doing, whether that's advocacy, communication, supporting young people in different ways. We need more of that in the Commonwealth. If you're a direct service organization here, I'd ask you if there was anything you heard up on this panel that you thought, oh, I want to learn more about it, or I didn't know about that. take the time now, go up, make a connection. This is how we're going to support our young people, so get that information. And the other thing I'd say is that through our partners, what we've heard about from our direct service organizations is that they want to engage more in policy and advocacy, but they aren't quite sure how. Come and talk to Juan, to Antonia, to any of the people up here. There are ways that you can engage, and we need your voices. We need the voices of your young people to make the changes. So when we think about that advocacy work, we need to advocate for increased capacity and support for our young people. We need transparent and actionable data that we can all use. We need to expand the programs that you've heard up here. I mean, early college is certainly a success. It needs more. And we've heard about all these other things. So there's a lot we can be advocating for, and we need to be doing that together. So I want to say thank you for taking all these hours this morning to do this work, and for all the hours in all of your days to do this work. And thanks again to the panel and to Juan and Antonia and TBF.